Well, efforts to continue to try and seize assets belonging to the Gaddafi family. Today, all 27 members of the European Union agreed to impose sanctions on the $70 billion Libyan Investment Authority. Among its considerable investments in Europe, the Libyan fund owns a 7% stake in the Italian soccer club Juventus, a 2% stake in Fiat, and a 3% stake in the publishing group Pearson plc, which owns the Financial Times here. Well, joining me from our studios in central London is Anthea Lawson, who's head of the kleptocracy campaign at Global Witness. Anthea, first of all, this move by the European Union to freeze the investment fund, do you welcome that? Is that significant?
Yeah, it's very significant. What's interesting about it is that it's come so late, that it's taken this long. And it's come late in two ways. Firstly, the initial moves to freeze some of the Gaddafi family's assets happened quite a few days ago. But secondly, on the much bigger scale, it's taken decades of European financial institutions accepting Gaddafi and the Gaddafi regime's money, and nothing's been done about it. And it's only once people are dying in the streets that Europe has decided that it wants to do something about Gaddafi's money. And I think there's a real problem there.
And since those announcements were made about sanctions, do you feel that the banks, for instance, are doing their bit to implement it?
Well, it's very hard to know exactly what's going on, although we're hearing from behind the scenes that there's an almighty frantic scrabble going on to locate this money, both on the part of the Treasury, for example, in the UK, and the banks that have got the money. The real question is, these banks should know what money they've got, and this should be straightforward, because banks are required to do checks, it's called due diligence, on their customers and on their source of funds. And if they're dealing with a senior official, such as Gaddafi, then they're required to do extra checks and to submit reports to the authorities if they've got concerns that those funds might have been corruptly earned. Now, if it's taken up until now to start freezing the funds, it does raise the question about whether the banks were doing these checks properly in the first place, and whether our regulators were doing what is necessary to make sure they were doing them.
I mean, you make it sound quite easy, but isn't it equally easy for these dictators to hide their money in shell companies, offshore, and so on?
We've left it very easy for them to do so at the moment. We require banks to know who they're dealing with, but at the same time there is a loophole that in any country you can set up a front company or a trust or a series of them and hide your identity, and that's one of the loopholes that needs to be closed. Hopefully, one of the positive things that might come out of this interest in the money from Libya at the moment is that we might see a change in the system to close some of these loopholes, so that people setting up front companies have to disclose who they are.
Now, these sanctions have deliberately been targeted at the Gaddafi family, so that the idea is that they won't hurt the ordinary people of Libya. But a lot of oil traders are now saying, because of the sanctions, because, for instance, they can't trade oil in dollars, they'd rather not do business with Libya. In other words, it's too difficult to decide whether the money is going to the Gaddafi family or not, so they stop doing business altogether. And won't that therefore hurt the Libyan people?
Well, there's another way of looking at that, and there's another way of dealing with this, which is that the oil industry and governments together could decide to put the oil money in some kind of escrow fund, which the Gaddafis themselves don't have access to, so that the people of Libya don't suffer. That's something that could happen.
Anthea Lawson, thank you very much.